still the coolest thing in that movie. It's the only really cool thing in that movie. The only really good thing in that movie. Anyway, first off, Spider-Man.
I'll say it again with my chest for the people sitting in back. The Wheel of Time is not medieval fantasy!
Who is this man?
This is Daniel Green.
What did I just hear him say?
The Wheel of Time is not medieval fantasy.
Words are meaningless to this man.
Yeah, also he was relatively forgiving. It was only until the show was all the way out that he realized, oh, maybe it's just not, it's heavily undercooked.
Like his brain.
It depends on the subject matter. Like, he at least had the sense to say that, Sword of Truth was bad. But anyway, let's bring in our favorite boomer.
Yes, I was amused that day. So, greetings. Anybody in there yet? Probably not.
We got one. Hey, Tyler Preston. Good afternoon. All right.
Greetings, minion. I mean, minions.
Alrighty. So, I think that it is that our friend Count Valerian is starting things off. So.
There we go. There we go. It helps if you can see it because, well, actually, I don't know how well you can easily read that, but you can, if you can read it, then you can see the Frankified Tolkien stuff. So where we were, this is the French, this is the Count of Montefato, Middle Earth in 19th century France. Samoir Gamgès has been captured by, he's been arrested, and after being told he will be freed, he's being taken to the dread, infamous prison called Lockhol. So, the guards escorted Gamgès down a winding staircase and to an exiguous cell. Into an exiguous cell with no other furniture than a rather uncomfortable bed in tasteless elvish modern, filled with straw. It was so appalling that even a chériférie would have been more agreeable. They untied him and left him. The clanging of the barred door behind them was like a death knell in Samoir's heart. He did not sleep all night, for his mind was ridden by the thought that he must speak to the governor of the prison, find out why he was being imprisoned, and prove his innocence. The next day, his jailer arrived with a highly unsatisfactory baguette and chocolat, which wanted no better setting than this definitely not a la mode prison. "Why am I here?" demanded Gamgès. "May I speak to the governor?" "I cannot answer your questions," said the jailer. "And seeing the governor will be pointless, en tout cas. I have done no wrong." One can hardly call underage smoking wrong, after all. "Monsieur de Villefaramir promised me that I would be released, for the love of El Barret and Lucienne la Belle, mistress of 7 kings, 12 princes, 24 dukes, and 31 counts. Let me speak to the governor and prove that I am innocent." "As if that would do any good," shrugged the jailer. "You are mad. I will send you down below with the lunatics, like the old abbé who keeps babbling about a trifle that we would fancy if we would release him. Bah, fool. Hobbits do not eat trifle. We feast on the bûche de Yule." Half a second. just grabbing some water. And so, the following morning, a guard arrived and escorted Samoir down below, into an even more unpleasant cell. The bed there was in such bad taste that it must have been dwarf work. Out of the cell came a stench, a foul reek, as if the filth unnameable of 100 Gaulois littered bidets were hoarded therein. Day followed day, month followed month, and year followed year, in a dreary succession of hours that suffered no measurement beyond the daily arrival of the jailer, who broke the darkness with a light that wavered like a noisome exhalation of decay, a lumière de cadavre, a light that illuminated nothing. Every day it was the same hard baguette with jam, and the same glass of chocolat for Samoir. And they had been very evidently prepared by inferior chefs. No answer did the jailer ever give to Samoir's pleas to speak to the governor. This routine was admittedly interrupted somewhat by the arrival of an inspector of prisons, who asked Gomges some pointed questions to which the latter gave equally pointed answers, concluding his eloquent response with, "Just ask Monsieur de Villefaramir, the steward du roi. Par Héroux, did I mention that the wine here was made in a pissoir, and not one of the better ones at that?" "Yes, you did," replied the inspector, who then promised he would indeed speak to Villefaramir. Thereupon he left the cell of Samoir and went to see the other mad prisoner, an elderly Italian savant. That should be Talorian, actually. But anyway, savant who claimed to possess the secret of a remarkable treasure, which he would give his captors in exchange for liberty. "Ah," criticized the inspector with the naivete of corruption, "if he were truly rich, he would not be in prison." The abbé's only reply was a glance of utter disdain. The inspector's visit had revived Gomges' spirits, reminding him that the shadows of captivity were but a passing thing. He resumed the habit of counting the days by scratching tallies on the wall. He made projects for his life together with Rosédes and her Champignon. He resolved to wait a fortnight for his release. When that failed, he realized that his had been the notion of a nini amier, and determined to wait another 3 months. Failing that, he endured another 6 months. After all, had not the Gaffier always said that no wine should be drunk before its time? During this entire period, nothing had changed. Not even the appalling jam that the jailer served with Samoir's daily baguette. Gomges began to wonder whether the inspector's arrival had been nothing but a pleasant dream. The jailer no longer bothered even to shrug when questioned about Gomges' eventual release. Gomges almost forgot his own name and began to call himself Numéro 1420. Samoir begged his jailer for books, for a promenade, for herbe à pipe, for a Loto-Trek poster, for a crossword puzzle. When these things were denied, he asked to be moved to another cell, for any change, even for the worse, was at least a change. This too was refused. Gomges began to envy the prisoners communally herded together in the bagne. At least they had company, even if it be of those of l'Esprit d'Orc. He pleaded with his jailer to allow him a companion. The jailer was kind enough to petition the governor, but the latter refused, on the grounds that the rats were best not put all in one trap, lest they plot a revolution. Then, all Hobbitane resources being exhausted, he turned to Eru and the Valar, the last recourse of the unfortunate. But he remained a prisoner despite all his prayers. Luthien, who had not refused the pleas of 74 monarchs and nobles, disdained that of a simple mariner. Gamgés was not an educated Hobbit, and so could not distract himself with thoughts of former ages or of remote peoples. The wisdom of Gondor was to him a closed book. He had nothing but his own past, so short, his present, so somber, and his future, so doubtful. One thought alone occupied him, the thought that he had been deprived of his happiness without apparent cause. This injustice devoured him, as, in the Angaband of Dante, the pitiless Fiannoir devours the skull of the Archbishop Morgau. Death, he raged, was too small a punishment for the crime that had been done him. Nay, death was a release, more comforting than the embrace of the fallen elf grisettes of Rivendell. From this meditation, he fell into dark notions of suicide. Woe to him who, descending upon the slope of affliction, dallies with such thoughts. More treacherous are they than a mushroom blight, that improveth the scent of the fungi, but rendereth them deadly withal. Trapped in such a champignonerie of doom, Samoir began to think of the places behind which there was a black brink and an empty fall into nothingness. But there was no escape that way. That was to do nothing, not even to indulge in the banality of an adulterous affair. His reverie was interrupted by faint knocks that seemed to arise from out of the depths. Tom-top, top-tom, tom-bom, ding-dang-dong. But no, they came not from the depths, but from the wall against which he lay. It seemed to the young Hobbit as if Eru were finally moved to pity at the edge of the abysm into which he had been on the point of falling, without a rope wherewith to save himself. That is the sound of a hammer, or I have never heard one, he thought. But who could have a hammer in a place like this? I must discover who it is. Et c'est un fait, ça. Perhaps we can contrive a plan of escape. If not, we can at least converse, compare notes on cuisine, whatever. Resolving to risk everything to find his companion in prison, he dissevered the handle of a pan that he had lovingly kept by him all the years of his imprisonment, and could hardly bear to damage, but for this one hope that filled his soul. He began to delve in the direction of the tom-tapping, cautiously, for fear of alarming the other, but steadily. At last, weary and feeling finally defeated, he sat on a heap of rubble and held his head in his hands. And then, suddenly, new strength rose in him, and his voice rang out, and the words of his own came unbidden to fit the simple tune. Frère Charque, dormez-vous, dormez-vous, tuez les entuives, rom, 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 rom. He stopped short, for he thought he heard an answering voice, sepulchral as the depths, intone the words. Who sings of killing and of entuives in the same song? By the lingerie of Elbereth, cried Gamgés, you who have spoken, speak again, though your voice fill me with terror. Who are you? Who are you? Returned the voice. An unhappy prisoner from the Shire, replied Gamgés. My name is Samoir Gamgés, and I was first mate of the Pharazôn. How long have you been here? Since the 28th of Neni Moz, 1815, in the calendar of the Shire. Your crime? I am innocent, albeit falsely accused of conspiring to restore Charcolion to the throne of Arnor. Is Charcolion then no longer in power? He was overthrown by Aragon's royalists. But how long have you been interred here that you were unaware of that? Since 1811, replied the voice, and its owner thereupon entered Samoir's cell. I came here with 12 companions who were fed one by one to the loup-garou, but the 12th had the courage to lace himself with silmarillium, and so slew the beast even in being devoured by it. But tell me, on what gives your cell? Gamgez looked and saw to his amazement an elderly hobbit, very similarly around 111 years old, dressed in rags, on a corridor that ends in what passes for a courtyard, he replied. I feared it was so, said the old hobbit. I have excavated in the wrong direction, and have expended all my effort in vain. Mais non, replied Gamgez. I am young and strong, and will dig a way out. Let's see. How many more pages in this chapter? All right. Let me finish this page anyway. I cannot see it, sighed the old hobbit, but with your hope I will hope. And who are you? I am the Abbé Frodia, more commonly called Numéro 144, and was imprisoned for the crime of supporting Charcolion's vision of a better tomorrow. Much we could accomplish, or so I hoped, to heal the disorders of the world in the service of the high and ultimate service, knowledge, rule, and order. I could have written a book about it. In fact, I did. That must have been long ago, before you came here. Years uncounted have passed since then. I have written the book in my cell, replied Frodia, and the years are not uncounted, but are exactly 17 years, 72 days, 4 hours, 46 minutes, and 40 seconds. But on what material do you write the book? With what do you write it? And how can you see to write in this sempiternal and everlasting darkness? And how can you measure the days at all, let alone so precisely? One more page. I measure time with a simple palantir, replied the Abbé. It cannot see very far, but it can see the sky through the window, pointing to a slit so narrow that a cockroach would have been hard put to penetrate it, and thus distinguish day and night, as well as perceiving some of the brighter luminaries of the nocturnal sky, enabling me to make passable astronomical calculations. I made the palantir out of my gruel through what the Eldar call Kimingole, and I employ the same science to create a light in dark places, where all other lights go out of my fingernails. As for this book, I am writing it on my bed sheets in an ink made out of what it pleases me to call mushroom juice. How can you possibly accomplish these marvels? Le bon goût, voilà le secret, said the Abbé with a smile. You would be surprised at how much one can accomplish with so little. Such merveilleux knowledge as you possess must have been obtained from books, but how can you have read such books in this tenebrous abysm? Inquired Samoir, trembling with astoundment. And we'll have to find out the answer to that later.
Well, if you are somewhat versed in classic literature, you know, or even have just seen the movie, you know exactly the reason.
I forget what I was talking about.
Well, no, I mean like the how he got the books.
He, as I recall, he flat out memorized them.
I thought they like somebody took pity on him and said, "Okay, fine, you can have some books."
Hmm.
Could be.
Maybe. I don't remember. It's been a while since I read it.
It has been a long time, and since I have read it, admittedly, it's been like 10 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of it he just had as I recall, he had such a perfect memory that he was able to reproduce all that stuff in his in his in his head. So anyway, that's that.
I'm trying to find a summary, but I'm not finding the info.
What a bunch of losers, or losers actually, says White Dragon. What a bunch of losers. What?
It's because we're a bunch of nerds eating stuff.
No.
You finally see this after like 20 minutes?
Yeah, but loser, he's got it as a possessive. What are the
Well-
losers possessing?
Well,
Our
here's the
souls?
problem. White's not very good at spelling.
Oh god, Valerian, you would get
Yes.
an aneurysm reading his script. I swear to God, the amount of misspellings and grammatical mistakes, it grinds against my soul.
This
Like-
is a
Like literally, he spells dying like you and I would spell dying as. So he spells dying as in dying like as in you're close to death, as dying as in you're dyeing a coat red,
fair enough.
or abominable is he accidentally spelled it abdominal. Like
Oh, that's a
I'm
nice one.
like I'm sorry, White, but your spelling is. But you really needed to pay. But like, I think you might need to consult some Webster's dictionary stuff because
I
Yeah,
will
what-
fix it for you, okay? Seriously, it's not that hard. Go to fucking Grammarly. It'll fix everything up for you.
Or
or
use spell check. Sorry,
or
but what's
just Google Docs spell check will fix all your problems.
who knew that this was this one of the purposes of the writer's showcase is to get feedback to help us improve, but this is a case where actually the person who's not reading is getting the feedback.
Because
Yeah,
me and
well-
Dunn both read a script. It's just so bad.
Well, the thing is, like, he doesn't necessarily have to spell it correctly since it's spoken word stuff. And
But
what
it's-
matters is he gets his thought out, but it's still like,
It hurts
like-
reading it.
yeah, a little bit.
Because I want it to be readable, and it's not. Imagine giving that as a paper to literally anyone. They'd be like, "What the fuck is this?"
That said, we do kind of miss having him on as a guest here.
We love you, White. It was just like, we love you, White, but it's just this is the one thing that we can like rib you a little bit for.
Yeah, your script is fine. It just looks bad. It goes against all of my sensibilities.
It destroys our souls. I haven't seen it, but it probably destroys our souls.
I wouldn't say it destroys anybody's souls, but it is hilarious.
I mean,
It
my
is a
soul's easily
story.
destroyed too.
Oh, well,
Remember, Valerian is someone who gets hurt by anyone misusing the word literally.
Well, that's worse than misspelling, though. But I mean, but it's true that I am a purist and proud of it.
Worse? Okay. Worse. Okay.
Yeah, it's worse because it affects meaning.
Well, technically spelling does as well. You are literally using a different word.
I would say that you misusing the word dying as is pretty up there.
Yeah, it's still not as bad as literally, though.
Really?
Why? Like, I get it's not the people do not use it in the correct definition, but it's not worse than literally using a different word because people can tell you're using emphasis half the time.
Well, there's not much point in even having words if we're not going to use them to mean anything.
It does still mean something. Is this with context? You can mostly tell when someone is actually meaning literally or figuratively literally. Not always, but it is a thing. Meanwhile, dying and dying, like color dye, those different meanings of all. Because I am dying means I'm committing racism. Compared to I am dying, which means I am doing what I normally do, which is dying inside slowly every day.
But even there, you can probably tell from the context. I think we should probably have higher standards in literature than we knew what he meant from the context, even though he can't use the English language.
Well, we're trying to say there's like a less egregious mistake than using a different word, which you could assume it's a misspelling, but it still means something very different if you read it correctly.
Well, they're both pretty bad anyway. Besides, I bet the white chap probably misuses literally too.
Yeah, that's not inaccurate. Having been on multiple streams, the public education in California is apparently ass.
Well, I mean, to be fair, C.S. Lewis once got caught abusing the word literally.
Mm.
And that was back like in the 40s. So
I think people started to not care anymore. Or really. They just care if it's readable.
Yeah, but question. Is saying literally what the fuck incorrect?
I depends on the subject that you're talking about. No comment.
Just is that grammatically incorrect when someone is like literally what the fuck?
Well, I mean, the F word isn't really a noun; it's a verb. So I guess it's incorrect in that sense. Actually, I'm not so sure. Can the F word be used as a noun? I'm not so sure, actually.
Well, if the man's name is the F word, I guess so.
Not necessarily. People sometimes use fuck as a noun. I think like I had a fuck. That would be a noun then, right?
Okay, so I guess what the F would be correct if you're not sure what you had intercourse with. No comment.
Or I think like, you dumb F.
If you slept with someone who's really stupid, you literally dumb F.
Or just when the F word is synonymous with jerk or idiot.
It is at this point a colloquial thing of you fuck. I'm actually remembering Wolf who had the best sound clip of calling, I think it was Rags, you fuck.
The F word means lots of things these days.
Yeah, I just know that like he called a Just Right a disingenuous faggot, and it was hilarious.
Oh yes, yeah, interesting.
I still don't know when he called someone a fat Asian bitch. I know it's a soundbite that exists, but I don't.
It would have been in his TLJ rant.
So one of his own videos.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was like,
friggin' hated Rose Tico, and justifiably so. Rose Tico sucks.
Yes, the actor is honestly pretty outside of that fucking movie.
Yeah, she's fine. And they just decided that, like, let's just make her frumpy to appeal to the potatoes in the audience.
It feels so antithetical because normally it's the opposite that happens. Normally they let an actor who's really pretty in just for their looks because they're attractive to everybody. And this time they did the exact opposite. They got an attractive actor, so they made her unattractive for no reason.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I even had a good way. You could give her scars to try making her unattractive. That'd be nice. We called Rose Fat Asian Doll.
He sounds like a charmer.
Oh, he is
Wolf.
hilarious. He was
Yes.
hilarious. I love Wolf. Wolf is awesome. He just kind of he's just kind of one of those people who makes statements that you could say a little bit over the line, but it's funny enough that I'm just like, I'll allow it.
Yeah, he is very uncompromising, and it's part of the appeal.
Yeah. Or he was. Like, he's left YouTube because of severe depression.
Yeah, but he's still, like, around.
Not really. He's not. I don't think he has any. Like, the only people he has contact with are his buddies from EFAP. I think pretty much nobody else he has contact with.
True. I
Pity.
actually tried to... He wrote a book called Iridescence, and I tried to be like, is it still on sale? It's no. However, because of this, I do know his real name.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
while they're no longer purchasable, he has not removed his name. And it's actually a pretty good one, too.
Probably best not out him, I guess.
Well, if he's put it out, if he's permanently put it out on a book, that means it's actually already permanently out on an EFAP. So
I'm not sure about on EFAP, but you can easily find out his book Iridescence and try looking up to purchase it, see it's not available, but then also see his full name.
somebody also said they bought their book. It said it's by X author, right? And Wolf says his name. So it's publicly available information, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Not to mention, it's unlikely that a lot of people. It's unlikely that any of his deadly enemies are watching this live stream.
Well, how would they ever find him?
It's not even just deadly enemies, it's just people who want to bug him. Because they were like, oh my god, it's Wolf.
Well, here's the thing: how would they even contact him?
I don't know, but people can do things.
It might be available. It might be available on the internet. There are websites where you can buy people's contact information and stuff. Apparently,
Probably just traveling salesman as well is a problem. Anyway, Count Valerian, it is your turn. You've got 30 minutes. Oh,
What?
no, wait. Not aspiring writer. You have 30 minutes. It's Habit that you're first. It's Habit that you're second, I guess.
we're not even remotely the same person.
No,
Right.
one looks like Christopher Lee around the Hobbit era, and the other one, I have no idea, is probably some shrimpy guy.
I don't even know what you mean by that. I'm not sure if I'm going to be insulted or not, but I'm just going to say insulted. And if you can't tell, those listening, we're both very tired because we've all slept for 4 to 5 hours. So I'm going to read this. And
And
Time to
after
have a
this, I'm
flame
going
war.
to after this, I'm going to probably 2 to 3 hour stream
with the literature devil himself.
This is a flame. This is a flame reading, and they're going to have a falling out right now.
No, we both have good senses of humor.
Father, I want my money back.
Sorry, no, we don't do refunds here.
Die screaming.
You guys pay us?
Pay no attention to the large bank account behind the curtain. No, I am fairly rich, but that's mostly from my part-time wages at Walmart.
I'm fairly
Walmart, it's a
poor.
secret to success.
Well, it's basically because I have no bills to pay, and I just and I just shove my money into the stock market.
You don't have to pay bills or rent. That would make a big difference. If you don't have to pay rent, that's a big difference right there.
Yep, living with your parents has big advantages.
Yes.
Yeah, no doubt. I have no idea when my sister's moving out, but she is currently fine here.
Okay.
So, anyways,
Your turn.
yeah. Recapping, previous chapter, Q was on Sullen. He was running away from the Angels, and he had to fight Vampra, the leader of the Angels. He lost badly, and the chapter got with Mark rearing his fist to slug him across the face, and so here we are. Q woke up moaning, the area of his face near his eye dropping with his pulse, making it uncomfortable to keep it shut. Pushing himself up, he groaned as his body complained with aches from the small of his back to the bottom of his feet. What kind of beating had he taken this time? He leaned back on the cold metal bench as he tried to recall what happened. He'd gone to Sullen too and decided to visit Podal before continuing on to the tunnels. Someone had followed him, and Q shot up and immediately sat back down, his head swimming from emotion. He had fought an angel. Multiple angels. He had fought Vampra and saw Mark before getting slugged unconscious. He felt that the area he'd been hit, the skin sensitive to his touch. Probably had a black eye, too. Looking down, Q started as he realized he wasn't in his gear. He'd been stripped of his coat and hat and forced into an ugly white jumpsuit. The room, cell, he was in was barely lit enough to see his hands. The dark metal walls seeming to blend together and go on forever, like he was in the middle of a void. His fist slammed down against a bench. After all these years, he was now trapped in a glorified box. He knew nothing about the cells and entertainment centers, and there wasn't any point in trying to find out now. Prisoners don't spend more than a month in these cells before being either released or transferred to E2 Prime for execution. And judging from what he had heard from Vampra and Mark's conversation, he probably wasn't going to have even that. Despite himself, Q stood up slowly and started groping the wall, trying to find the door to his cell. He should be able to feel the edges. But one round showed him that there wasn't anything to feel, not even a divide in the walls. Feeling around till he found the bench, Q sat down and started pulling at his jumpsuit. It was tight on his body, a size or two too small for him. But no matter what he did, whether it be pulling, scrunching, or biting, he could not make the jumpsuit rip. The material was too strong and elastic. Deciding to remove it, he reached back and frowned when he couldn't feel anything. No buttons, zippers, or straps which he could use to remove the jumpsuit. They must have designed them to be out of reach. Something ran down his face. Reaching up to touch it, he was surprised to find himself sweating from his struggling. Now that he focused on it, he found himself uncomfortably warm, his mouth already feeling dry. He grimaced as he thought about a Maquis wearing one of these. They'd feel like a fish laid out in the sun to cook. Waiting in the dark, time feeling amorphous, a sudden bright light forced him to look away, his eyes burning as if he had looked straight at the sun. Peeking through his fingers, blinking away the tears filling his eyes, he saw the entire front wall lower down noiselessly. Light from the outside flooded the room, and his eyes adjusted enough for him to see 5 guards outside, wearing black uniforms with an orange spiral going up one of the sleeves to their elbow. 2 held plasma rifles, and 2 others had small plasma arms holstered at their belt, along with 2 long daggers, one curved at the tip. The 2 with the daggers had another spiral on the other sleeve, one with yellow and one with blue. A space host and a mind host set to watch him. The 5th guard had only a small plasma arm at his hip, his hands filled with a tray with packets. It seemed they weren't going to risk him even eating with the other inmates. Despite himself, Q smiled at the precautions taken, the wariness in their expressions. They thought there was still a chance he might escape. His reputation truly did precede him. As the guard with the food walked in, Q felt a touch on his mind. The touch of a mind toast that he had learned to recognize. A growl rumbled in his throat as he clenched his hand into a fist, glaring at the mind toast from behind his fingers. The mind toast stepped back, surprised at the rage they were feeling for him, but the touch remained. Staying where he was, Q watched as the guard laid the food in the middle of the room. The walls now visible for him to see the cell was about as big as Podal's room. He didn't make any move to attack the guard. The mind host was reading his mind to make sure of that. They were probably reading him thinking about how he can't attack the guard because of them. The growling in his throat got louder. He hated mind hosts. Nothing was private when they were around. The fifth guard scurried away, obviously trying to appear unafraid, but the glances behind him said otherwise. The wall started to rise again without even the hum or hiss of machinery. Q stood up and brought the tray back to the bench before the wall closed up, putting him back in darkness. It took a while before his eyes readjusted enough to make out what he had been given. A water pack and 2 food packs. Nothing he could throw at his guards to blind them. He tried squeezing one of the food packs to pop, even sitting on it. All he did was succeeding making the food pack smelly when he was forced to suck it through the built-in straw, which was made not to let anything out unless he was sucking on it. Whatever was in the packs was mush, tasted like sand, and dissolved in his mouth almost immediately. When he spit some out, it disappeared in seconds with a slight hiss. The water was fine, thankfully, and he drank it all, not wanting to waste any on an unlikely attempt at escape. He was already feeling feverish from being in his cell for a day. The guards came back later, he still couldn't tell how long, to take the tray away. He had left it next to him, and rather than sending him a potential hostage, the space host picked up the tray with telekinesis. Once back in the darkness and the touch on his mind was gone, he finally tried what he'd been dreading. What may potentially be his only hope of getting out of here, if he still had it. Focusing, he tried using his implant, making it do an overlay over his vision. He had to suppress his excitement when he saw something uttered in blackness. He didn't know if the mind host was still out there, and didn't want to accidentally grab their attention. It seemed when they had prepared him for detainment, they either didn't know about the implant, or decided it was not worth removing. Brain implants weren't unknown, and he was pretty sure Vampira had one for her gloves and Mark for his coat. But the implants the Ascending Territory made were little more than convenient on and off switches. His, besides being the keystone for his arsenal, was a short and long-range comm and repeater, something he knew they wouldn't even have fathomed if they saw it. The smallest long-range comms were as big as he was. It came with the drawback that its range was far more limited than most long-range comms, but its size more than made up for it. Focusing on the overlay over his vision, he saw he'd been here for around a standard day. There was a timer at the corner of his vision, counting down from a standard week. Working his jaw, Q stared at the timer, fully aware of what it meant. Corridan was incredibly secretive about his technology, to the point of employing Q to hunt down any technology he lost all those years ago. The fact Corridan sold him any technology was not small, but his trust did not extend so far as not to have a contingency. The contingency being they exploded after leaving a certain range. Corridan had initially made it so they detonated immediately, but he convinced him to try and give him time to recover it. With 1 day gone, he had 9 days left to try and get back his gear before they were no better than scrap metal. 9 days where he had to somehow escape, find the location where they had sent his gear, sneak into that location with no units or resources, and trying to stay out of the Ascending Territory's hands. Rubbing a hand over his face, he mentally settled at its side. First step was finding some way to escape. Focusing, he had his implant start accessing the detention center's communication logs. Besides jamming and extending signals, his implant could intercept and decrypt communications, and a facility like this would have them saved somewhere. He could see his previous communications with Mitra and Manak, and he was already in the process of decrypting the detention center's logs. His implant's encryption was also more advanced than normal, expediting the process considerably. The light encryption on Mark's and Vampira's mask had taken it a minute, meaning it would normally have taken around 10 standard minutes. The encryption for the detention center was vastly heavier, but it would only be a few hours before he had access. He had nothing to do but wait. Q tried pacing to pass the time, but after getting turned around and walking into the wall, he decided to lie down. He wanted to try and contact someone, but that would not go unnoticed, and he would lose the one advantage he still had. Still, if nothing useful came up in the logs, he may have to anyways. He didn't know when he dozed off, but when he came to, all the logs had been decrypted. Setting himself up, he started reading and listening through them, starting from when he'd been admitted in. There were mostly reports and updates from officers, along with some details on prisoners being released. There were no details on his mission, detainment, or transfer. He'd almost reached the end when something caught his eye. There was a communication under a different encryption from the rest, and sent to a completely different set of coordinates. The message contained details of his transfer. It was scheduled for the next day, where he'd be escorted to a disguised freighter. The guard complement was listed in detail, from how many to what they'd be using, and a description of the freighter and internal design, along with a list of modifications made to it. It was a start of the message, but it was a start of the message that made Q curious. The message referred to him as Q, not Quidus or Laodicean, as he was sure the ascending territory would do. The way the message was formatted didn't seem like an official report. It was detailed and organized, but he'd seen official ascending territory reports. He had written some himself. There was a strict format used, and this didn't follow it. Closing the message and the overlay, Q clasped his hands and rested his chin on them. Someone was interested in the details of his transfer. Who they were and what they wanted, he had no idea. But whoever they were, he hoped they had something planned with that information, because he was going to gamble that, tomorrow, he was going to find out. End of chapter. Thoughts, concerns, comments, kicks.
Seems straightforward. Basically, it's just a little bit of detective work. Necessary, like, time use. Didn't notice anything, like, particularly outstanding with it, but you kind of need this kind of thing in order to say, okay, like, character needs a breather, just kind of figure out things. I guess the only thing I could think of was kind of like, does he talk to anybody? I couldn't quite, I'd follow. I think that is most of this in his head.
Pretty much all of it, yeah. I don't think he actually says a single word.
Okay. So I actually couldn't get a sense of, I don't think I could really get a sense of, like, what his location is.
He's in prison,
like,
right?
I don't know if, did you ever?
I said he was in a cell, yeah, or at like the
Yeah.
detainment center.
Or the Brit? Is there a ship?
Okay.
It's not a ship, it's a facility.
Okay, fair enough then. I was going to say if it's a ship, then I guess they'd call it the brig.
Yeah. He's being detained somewhere before being transferred the next day. He's just stuck in the really dark isolation cell.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you don't need to describe that too much. It's dark. So
Yeah, I was just a little bit confused as to what, like, where he was.
yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe use a sense of, maybe use like other senses like smells, or touch, in order to, like, or just kind of the lack of sensory stuff in order to kind of illustrate where he's at. Might be a good idea. But you can do as you please. Like, apparently, like, something that Stephen King does frequently is describe smell in order to get his readers into the scene. Like,
Whoop, 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 whoop.
Hmm?
You sounded a bit whoop, 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 whoop for a moment there.
Weird. But I was just saying, like, Stephen King uses smell description, like, in It. He says it smelled like a like pounds and pounds of elephant crap.
Well, yeah, well, I only noticed a couple of things. Let's see. Bottom of his feet. The soles of his feet, maybe?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There was a place somewhere where you had like as a conjunction. I don't know. Strictly speaking, that's wrong, but it depends on what. Also depends on what tone you want to have, how formal you want it to be.
Well, pretty much no author writing today is formal at all.
Well, I'm not asking. I wasn't asking you. You don't even sound like him.
I'm just stating I'm just stating factually that very few authors use a formal style nowadays.
Well, anyway, like is a conjunction. Strictly speaking, it should be. I'm just gonna toss out a couple of alternatives, and he can do whatever he wants with it. You could say as if he was, or as though he was, or you can also say as if he were. So you could do those, or you can keep the like, but you should be aware that the like is considered a little bit less correct.
Where was this?
I don't know. It was somewhere early. It was somewhere early on in the thing. So whichever one you do, the only thing is that people should. My only thing is that one should probably make a deliberate decision to do it one way or another way, depending on, what effect one wants to have.
True. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that factually, like I can't think of any like authors nowadays that do use like, I guess maybe Evan Winter, but that's because Evan Winter is writing in a Bronze Age Egypt fantasy realm.
George R. R. Martin.
But that he has to write something.
Yeah.
Well, that's we're talking about his style, not his productivity. They're not quite the same thing.
True.
All he did was.
I'll go for it. Sorry.
Sorry. All he did was succeeding somewhere in doing something. Maybe all he did was succeed in doing something or other. I'm sorry. I wrote these things while I was doing other stuff. I would scratch things down, write myself little notes now and then, so I can't tell precisely where these things are.
Yeah,
Maybe not.
the line is all he did was succeeding, making the food pack smelly.
Oh, all he managed to do was make the food packs smelly, or all he succeeded in doing was making the food pack smelly, maybe? I'm just tossing that thought out there. And those are all my picayune things that I have for now.
Was the like to have a problem was like he was in a void?
Like he was in a void. That was yeah. Like he was in a void. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
like
need to
in
change that. Yeah, I agree with Valerian there.
how so?
Yeah.
Well, because as though he was usually sounds better.
I think the reason that he thinks that sounds better in this context is that void makes the word void is a more formal word. So that's probably why he thought why. I can't really speak for Breitlard, but maybe that's why. Because it does depend to some extent. A lot of these things do depend on context and what kind of narrative narrative voice you're using. And you should be aware of the possibility of using more than one narrative voice and not be bound solely by fashion. There seems to be a tendency among some to appeal solely to fashion, and that's not the only criterion one should necessarily be using when one's writing.
True, it really depends. But I'm just like, the people seem to prefer stuff that's wholly digestible.
I mean, if Tolkien had gone with fashion, we wouldn't even have Lord of the Rings, which means we wouldn't have modern fantasy, which means 9/10 of what you're writing wouldn't exist.
Agreed.
So that's not the sole criteria. So fashion's not the sole criterion that one ought to be applying.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree with that. I'm just like, it seems like a lot of people either like, I think like George R. R. Martin is kind of the only one that like uses an archaic style. Like Joe Abercrombie's like style is crass humor, is crass sardonic humor mixed in with like very very clever wordplay and descriptors. Brandon Sanderson's kind of like, as you put it, like kind of contemporary journalese speak for the most part.
Yeah, it's not bad, mind you. I mean, his style is still better than Brando Sando's style is still better than like Frank Herbert, because Frank Herbert has lots of jargon and is kind of turgid at times.
Yeah.
And Brando is more readable, even if he is a little even if he's a little more contemporary than is to my taste. Sometimes at least he's readable.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people kind of, yeah, it kind of like, it seems like that's kind of the style that publishers want, maybe, like, is probably a better term than like, it's the fashion. It's like, it seems like that's just what people want. It seems like that's what they're appealing to, is like, people want like stuff that's easily digestible.
But people don't all want the same thing.
True, but that the publishers are just publishers are generally just they're the people that are just looking at X, Y, and Z demographics and saying, okay, these books seem to sell well. Let's make sure that we're going with that.
Hmm.
And they'll just and like they'll be kind of saying, okay, let's who's selling well? Joe Abercrombie's selling well. Let's do like super crass, really dark stuff. Or they'll see, oh, Brandon's doing extremely well. Let's make sure that we're getting really creative type fantasy that doesn't have like much similarities to the Tolkien stuff, but rather is extremely inventive world building and stuff. It's I think like it was, I think somebody or other put it well, that if you can like say my book is like X, Y, and Z put together, publishers will usually be like more likely to pick up your book.
So basically, publishers want you to imitate someone who's already successful. They don't want. If Tolkien were trying to write today, the publishers would tell him, "Hey man, you need to write like so and so if you want to get published." Of course, publishers in his own day, he wasn't fashionable either, so and he managed somehow. But that's what they'd be telling him.
Undoubtedly, yeah.
Like they'd probably be telling Homer to, you need to imitate Joe Abercrombie. You need to imitate so and so. That's what they'd be telling him, telling Homer or Shakespeare or any of those guys.
Possibly, though, if you go to Shadow Mountain, at least they will never ask you to imitate Joe Abercrombie because it's a Mormon publication.
Well, they'll tell you to imitate Brando Sando because he is Mormon, and he's fairly wholesome writing, and the content of his novels is fairly kind of wholesome anyway.
Yeah, either Brandon Sanderson or Brandon Mull, or other.
Is everyone in the Mormon church named Brandon?
I don't know if Brandon Mull is Mormon, but there are a lot of Utah guys named Brandon who are also writers.
And all the women are named Brenda.
Well, my mom's name is Shauna, but she was an Air Force brat, so. Oh. Maybe. I don't know. Well, yeah. I actually know only one Brenda, and that's my aunt, and that's one of my aunts.
Okay. So anyway.
All right. Alrighty, my turn. All right. So we're actually going to get some bad guy perspectives this week. Oh, my sister's dog has arrived. Hey, Raven, come here. Do not sniff around the cords at all. Thank you. Sit. Hey. Good girl. Come over here. Come here. Sweet. Alrighty. So, let's see. Night of the Abyss, Chapter 10. The Gust Queen. Alexandria awoke in an ornate coffin, then breath abruptly surging into her body. She sighed as she pushed the lid off with a burst of wind and flew up into the air, propelled upward by a swirling vortex of wind. Off to her side, Caesarius exited his own coffin, and with a powerful wave of water, while on the other, Gengaric came out in a brief surge of flames. The room they awakened in was a fine piece of work by any measure. Gold lined the woodwork, which was clearly expertly crafted, with the stones carved in well-preserved effigies of hunts and other important events. Near the coffins stood Lancelot, Alexandria's faithful spear, black hair tumbling past her shoulders, rounded cheekbones giving her a softer look, but her eyes told a very different story. Welcome home. Lancelot bowed and walked up to Alexandria, her hard golden eyes contrasting with her black hair. It's been a while, old friend. Would you get me a mirror, please? Alexandria said calmly, casually touching her face with red-lined pale fingers. I'd like to familiarize myself with my new form. Lancelot slapped her fingers, causing someone in a fine golden red and ridiculous outfit with a ridiculous-looking hat to walk over to them, eyes downcast. For the first time, it clicked in Alexandria's head that she, Caesarius, and Gengaric were all naked. Instead of covering herself in embarrassment like she would have done with her pure divine body, Alexandria carefully examined herself, barely noticing the slight chill of the stones on her bare feet. The body that Lancelot's followers had gotten for her was physically attractive, even if it did look different than the original body that Artoria that had been crafted for her. In the original body that the Great Mother herself had crafted for her. Her old body had been somewhat spindly by comparison to her new body, even if she was equal in strength to any of the strongest old ones. Except maybe Mordred. Alexandria admitted. Andrea thought, testing her arm by flexing it. Good muscle. She turned around and pulled her long emerald-colored hair to the side to examine herself from behind. It looked aesthetically pleasing, at least. What did you do to find suitable hosts? She asked, turning back around and examining her front. These were some of the most beautiful and powerful people in the kingdom. Lancelot cracked her knuckles, then nodded to Caesarius, who had created a tunic and trousers, though he left his arms bare so that he could have more freedom of movement as well as show off his large muscles. He was once Prince Alfar, a brawny but still intelligent man, and while our friend Gengaric, she nodded to the thin gold and red-lined elder one, is the High Captain Eldon, the ranking officer in the Nordenbard army. And me? Alexandria asked, glancing down at her waist. Abruptly, her face tightened as her entire line of thought was rerouted into an entirely different path. Why exactly do I have genitalia? She demanded. I thought the ritual smoothed these out. You thought wrong, Lancelot shrugged dismissively. Alexandria glared at her friend. She still has her original body, she thought jealously. She doesn't have to deal with having a pair of holes and loose bits of skin between her legs, or worse, a dangling, boneless finger like those two have to deal with, she added when she glanced at Jengari glaring down at himself while creating a new set of clothing. Humans seem to enjoy them. Lancela tilted her head and raised her eyebrows. That's because human bodily functions are disgusting. Alexandria ran her fingers down the other arm. Anyway, back to my original question. Lancela's grin took on a slightly cruel cast. You're inhabiting the body of Queen Annalana, the sole ruler of the Queen of Ortenbard. They named a kingdom after a minor elder one. Alexandria tilted her head. Did anything else remain? The system of knights remained, though their purpose is as a counter to mages. Lancela examined her fingernails. She was dressed in what was probably the style of the time. Crisp dress with a wide divided skirt showing a pair of leggings, and the upper bodice adorned with 4 red star-shaped medallions. Nobody really remembers us as gods, or even what their knights are shadows of. Many believe us to be simply myths or great warriors and rulers. I see. Alexandria created a set of clothes, though she used the style she was familiar with, a loose-fitting sleeveless white dress with a deep back. You might want to change your clothes, Lancela said mildly. Showing your arms and back to that degree is considered improper. Even from a queen, Alexandria asked, examining herself in the mirror. Especially from a queen, Lancela gestured to herself. This is considered as proper for a military woman. Though admittedly, I could be wearing something along the lines of a more formal gown. What do women of my rank wear in this day and age? Alexandria asked. Casually, Lancela created an illusory model of a woman wearing a dress that was form-fitting in the bust and very low-cut in the bodice, but her arms, back, and skirt covered the rest of her. Alexandria's mouth twisted in distaste. I will have to change the fashion then, she said firmly. That is not at all to my liking. Lancela rolled her eyes. Very well, there'll be a ball or some other event where this new, she laced the word with a slight grin, fashion of yours will be displayed. Currently, everyone thinks that you're all sick and indisposed, which has given us enough time to quietly replace everyone in the inner circle of this and the other provinces. This is with carefully planned and ambush attacks with ones close to the forest. Good, Alexandria said, absently toying with her green hair, eras with a slight bit of regret before she changed it to brown. We should make an attempt to fit in before we reveal ourselves to the people. Excellent plan. Lancela handed her a set of papers before doing the same with the other two. These are the pertinent bits of your lives that we pulled from your hosts' minds before you were cleansed. You should be able to get them memorized soon. What is the status of the plan going forward? Lancela asked, looking over the paper coolly. How are our forces arranged? The strategy is working perfectly, Lancela explained, motioning them to follow her. The armies of Nordenbard, Calabal, Ramesen, Grisha, and Vinarlos are stretched thin, which has allowed us to replace many high-ranking generals, and, in the case of your host, rulers throughout the land. With the current state of affairs, they will collapse from the demons that I've been sending throughout the kingdoms. I don't recognize any of those names. Alexandria rubbed her forehead. It's been so long. She trailed off, then closed her eyes and released a deep sigh. You'll have to tell me most of the important events that have transpired over the last 3,000 years, Lancela filled in when Alexandria gave her a questioning look. So long. Alexandria whispered, what does it look like out there? Come, Lancelot beckoned her over to a closed set of double doors. Let me show you your new kingdom. A pair of Lancelot's soldiers pushed open the doors, revealing a dim twilight day before them. Slowly, Alexandria walked out to the balcony and placed her hand on the balustrade, eyes surveying the enormous city before her. It's Byzantium, she whispered, but it's even more grand than I remember. There have been many advances in technology and architecture since you've been in the Amaran Plain, Lancelot explained to Caesarius and Gengaric. Ick followed them outside, both of them looking stunned. It's beautiful, Alexandria whispered, closing her eyes and letting her memory of this place play through her mind. Sitting with King Artorius and Queen Guinevere at the great round table, Mordred sat between Guinevere, the one who had formed his body, and next to Guinevere, the one who had formed his body, while Lancelot sat next to her father, Artorius, the other knights ringing the seats. She could clearly see streets where she had wandered through all those years ago. Remember talking to the people, making sure that their lives were pleasant, providing rain and blessings for little children. So long away, she thought. Soon I shall be worshipped as I once was. They will provide me with the adoration I am owed. Where is Siegfried being summoned? Alexandria asked Isilon City. We may have an issue. What issue? Lancelot asked, tone shifting from casual to alert in an instant. Mordred slipped his change and might be working to find a way out of the Amaran Plain. You told me he was imprisoned for all time. Fury burned in Lancelot's golden eyes as she seized the front of Alexandria's dress and pulled her close that they were glaring into each other's eyes. You promised me that he would never get free. Caesarius growled and summoned his blade, but Lancelot's spear appeared in her hand first and rested casually against his neck, immobilizing him like a statue for fear of her slicing open his throat. Those bonds should have held strong, but somehow they were broken. Alexandria kept her tone cool, but she couldn't help but feel a bit of fear. Now that she was locked into this human body facing Lancelot's divinely crafted form, she was at a slight disadvantage if it came to a fight. Hopefully their agreements and Lancelot's own disinterest in ruling would keep them from coming to blows. His sword was taken away. What danger was he? Lancelot demanded. You gave me his sword before he was cast down. He has Artorius' sword, Gengaric said mildly. He didn't destroy that accursed weapon after all. So he has Caliburn. Lancelot's teeth peeled back. So I assume Siegfried was trying to defeat my dear brother when he had no business fighting anyone of Mordred's sills with a sword that kills us permanently. Snarling, Lancelot dismissed her spear and released her grip on Alexandria's dress. We have no time to fight him properly. Alexandria knew that was an excuse before it left her mouth. The summoning was almost complete when Siegfried wasn't finished. That was not terribly well thought out, Lancelot hissed, seeming to regain some of her good humor. Whenever someone made a mistake, she was usually fairly amused by what ever happened, even if underneath she was quite angry. By this point, he's in the body I spent a great deal of time manipulating and maneuvering into the forest, where Fenrir's bloody wreck leaked all over the place before she managed to escape me. Her mouth twisted at the memory. Bloody wolf ghosts and trees springing up out of the ground like geysers, she muttered. Anyway, he's back, so we now have the great night wolf to deal with. Unfortunately, yes. Alexandria absently rubbed at her throat. Hopefully that spear wouldn't get it near her neck anytime soon. Can you get rid of him? I can, Lancelot shrugged, then nodded to Caesarius. Want to come wolf hunting with me? Won't be as challenging as dragon hunting. It should be fun. With all your time here, you still haven't found Fenra? Jengaric asked, Moshe ignoring Alexandria's frantic, subtle hand movements to tell him to stop. Lancel's eyes narrowed. No. She didn't elaborate, but Alexandria set a silent prayer to the Great Mother that wouldn't go any further. Jengaric shrugged. Well, now that there are more of us, we can cover more ground, he said mildly. I'll round up Oblivion and Beowulf, and so we can go tracking her. There's nothing to find. Lancelot's mouth twisted in distaste. She's vanished. I had to let her go after I found Fafnir. I had to work quickly and choose her sister instead of her because Fafnir was working on that damn ritual. We'll get a start. Or will you deal with her, sire? Jengaric shrugged and created a long skinny knife that he could spin through his fingers. If we find her, I'll bring you her hide. If anyone gets to skin the she-wolf, it's me, Lancelot said coldly. We'll discuss trophies when the quarry is netted and hobbled, Alexandria said firmly. Lancelot, tell Jengaric where the others are so that he can begin the hunt. Me and Caesarius have some identities to familiarize ourselves with. And that's the end. Thoughts? Feedback?
I like that. I liked the idea of a god being in a body it hates, and specifically if it's against genitalia. It's like, why do we have these things? I do not need to piss. Pissing is immoral. Get me a new body.
Oh, I do remember that. We're talking about the bit where it says human bodily functions are disgusting. Well, we can all agree with that.
Yeah, the human body is not a wondrous thing. It is horrifying.
It's disgusting. We should just get rid of it.
Well, then how are we to procreate? And we'll have bodies forever, so we'll just have perfect ones after we die.
Done. The perfect way of being is when we all make ourselves into simulations and AI. We no longer need these disgusting bodies. We'll just be wires and binary code.
The only drag is that then we'll have all these. We'll keep having computer errors and stuff messing about with whatever we're doing.
This is also true. So no system's perfect.
Yeah, perfect. We'll get perfected bodies eventually. Presumably, there's that. Let's see. Alexandria and who? Caesarius? Who are they again?
So Alexander, Caesarius, and Jengaric are the elder ones that Mordred met when he was leaving, just before he left the Amaran Plain. And they're some old friends of his.
Friends, actual friends, or friends in scare quotes?
Air quotes. They see him as a traitor because he sided with his two daughters, who after what they thought was a coup attempt, but it was really just them defending themselves from accusations of treason.
Fair enough. Unfortunately, I wasn't listening carefully enough to get any errors to correct. Isn't that a pity?
Yeah, it's fine.
Because I was in the kitchen doing things.
Beelzebub is in the kitchen getting ready for me. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Well, I'm going to eat something and then head off to Literature Devils to talk about Brandon Sanderson.
Oh, okay. That should be fun.
Ah, damn.
Yeah.
What about him?
Alrighty. Just stuff in general. He didn't give me specifics. It's pretty much probably just like his writing, teaching skills.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, we will call it good for today. Adios.